Welcome everyone, Grand Gnosis Master Dr. Thor Templar here, and let's talk about one of those other urban legends. Bruce Lee, the most overrated martial arts master. Certainly is. Bruce Lee was a consummate actor. He came from an acting family. He planned his entry into, quote, Hollywood or motion pictures carefully. Daddy was an actor. He even acted as a child, and he knew the camera. He knew what looked good, what looked bad, and was a master at looking extremely good. He knew exactly what to do, how to build his body to look like a cool, awesome martial artist. Many martial artists actually state that his very Western, good-looking physique was counter to really doing martial arts properly because certain muscles constrict certain movements. Everyone needs to know that these kind of urban legends grow up and people get too much credit for something while others get no credit whatsoever. A prime example of this is John Wayne. John Wayne was basically a mediocre horseman. There were stuntmen and other people who grew up on horses, who spent their entire lives on horses, who could ride much, much better than him. People thought John Wayne was a fantastic horseman because he looked so good on a horse. Because he was a consummate actor. John Wayne knew how to look cool, how to come off in a particular way that's very impressive, especially on film. The same goes with Bruce Lee. Now, let's not put down his extremely fanatical training, his knowing of his martial arts systems, etc. But if you want to come down and boil down martial arts to a fighting, not a goofball, let's go to the gym and do martial arts, the crap you see with people in their little gis that think that fighting is like that, that's not fighting, that's exercise. I'm talking about warfare, baby, on the street. Now, I'm sure that he could carry his own against many, many people. But if we're talking about the greats, people like Chuck Norris, the 5-time contact karate championship winner, 5 times, people. Bruce Lee never went into tournaments because he knew he couldn't win consistently. Could he win? Well, of course he could win, probably the majority of it, but he knew damn well that when it really came down to it, if he came up against a Chuck Norris type, he would lose. Chuck Norris, whose modified style and his brute force of Taekwondo is going to knock these kung fuis right out of space. The point is that producers even laughed at him, seeing while he was tall for a Chinese person, being 5'7", when he went out for different parts, when they had big men like John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, and so many other people who are 6 foot and above, he was laughed at as the little shrimp. He also had a horrible, typical Chinese accent that he could not get over. Just like his buddy Jackie Chan, who can really not speak English without a horrible Chinese accent. Why that is, I don't quite understand. But he was never taken seriously because of that. He also couldn't demonstrate as a 105-pound, skinny 5'7" guy. When he went to different producers' offices and did his little martial arts things, they just thought it was amusing. It was like a little girl doing something. This is stated in the commentaries you'll find on the Kung Fu television series. If you buy the original DVDs, you'll find the people who interviewed him that came up with that. So, certainly he's a very skilled martial artist, but he could never hold his own with any of the top martial artists out there. And the bottom line is these people don't tend to get credit. Do you really think that Bruce Lee could have handled a 6'6" Steven Seagal? Do you really think that that's going to be possible? Or the 6'2" Chuck Norris? Or even a similar sized Von Damme? Now, if you want to look at people, there's definitely, in terms of people who actually look the best on screen. Now, if we're getting into fighting, this is a whole different thing, because certainly little tiny boy Bruce Lee certainly couldn't have his own with a lot of people, including wrestlers who challenged him, which he refused to go at, because he knew they would get grabbed and choked out instantly, and that's the way it is. Anybody that knows martial arts knows that. So giving Bruce Lee his credit certainly should be given. But the point is that when we get into fighting, into combat, it's unlikely he would do well against big Western opponents. Physical bulk and skill is a major part of combat. A lot of people would like to dismiss this. I'm afraid it's truth. That's why weapons were invented. To equalize. That's why they called the Colt 45 the great equalizer, because some big fucker couldn't pound you into the ground because you put a gun to his head. So this is the way things really are, people. The prettiest person on the screen, without a doubt, is Van Damme. He looks the best. If you see him in his early Universal Soldier movies, this guy has the best body, even surpassing Bruce Lee as far as I'm concerned, if you want to compare physiques. He was a bodybuilder. He was a ballet dancer. And people hate him because he's a good-looking guy. And, of course, being a Frenchman doesn't help that people like him, or French from Belgium. So people trash him all the time. He certainly looks great on screen. But he is criticized because of that. So there's no doubt, if you watch his moves on screen, his very Hollywood kicks and his splits and everything else, this is very dramatic Hollywood martial arts, just as Bruce Lee did with all his Hollywood dramatic arts. And I believe it was Enter the Dragon, when he went against Kelly, you could see that there was no fighting involved. He ran around like a little monkey so he wouldn't be caught. That's what you do against bigger, stronger opponents when you're not armed. So, giving credit where it's due, he's far from a good fighter. Certainly, Steven Seagal looks the worst. Aikido don't look good on the screen. Almost all of his moves don't look good. And, of course, in his older age now, that he is doesn't really move from the waist down because he's so heavy, looks even worse, which is why he's moved to a lot of guns or just the upper Aikido arm movements. So he looks the worst. Chuck Norris looks pretty good for its system, but it doesn't look theatrical enough. But, even Chuck Norris, when he talks about, could he handle Bruce Lee, stated that Bruce Lee was a great technician. He moved really well. He knew everything. He looked really good. I'm a fighter with 5 titles. Well, there's a big difference between a fighter and a technician, and I think every real honest martial artist will agree with that. People that look at him and somehow idolize him, and maybe they like it because of the fact that he's kind of a little guy, mediocrely attractive, and they can relate to him, is a fallacy if we're talking about martial arts in general. Nor was anything he did overly profound in his philosophies or anything else, which he copied from most everybody else. He was a fanatical trainer. He was extremely strong for his size. Ultimately, the best fighter out there is a guy almost nobody knows about, and that's Joe Louis. And that's not the old boxer. This is Joe Louis, who unfortunately, because of his gruff personality, got blacklisted by Hollywood. But as a young man, he was probably, and throughout his entire career, the best fighter of all time. No one could go against him. He was able to learn every single system. Not only that, as a young guy, and particularly, he was very attractive, very well built. He did a karate movie, and unfortunately, because he demanded certain things, which from how he explains it, certainly wasn't unreasonable, but Hollywood blacklisted him. They didn't like his attitude. The producers didn't like the fact that he demanded certain foods on set to keep fit and working, and when he didn't get those, even refused to work for a period of time, he was then blacklisted. You don't see much about him anywhere else. He has a few books and other things he's written. But I'm not sure that it has to do with anything. He's a fearsome fighter, and I'm not sure that has anything to do with his style. He's got the physical ability to take down opponents. He's big, he's powerful, and he has the fast movements that equal any martial artist, so he is unstoppable. Very similar to Chuck Norris in many ways, and it certainly would be interesting if those two combated, who would be the actual winner. But if you notice, Chuck Norris, he uses also, and so did Bruce Lee for that matter, a lot of boxing and other things, because these are the types of things that you put power in to disable your opponents. All of these other mythical martial arts things from Dim Mak and other things are questionable in their actual proving. And I'll do another audio on all these mystical martial arts things. It's certainly fascinating. And, most martial artists are very interested in occultism, and occultists generally tend to be very interested in martial arts. I think everybody wants to be able to physically protect themselves and others when the time comes. So it's something of interest, I think, to everyone. But the more mystical aspects of the martial arts and what can and can't be done is just like the mystical arts of occultism in general. They're shrouded in mystery and fraud. So the one-inch punch, the using of chi and other things, it's unknown how this would work with Bruce Lee. He demonstrated it a few times, but we just don't know with all these things of how that would work actually in combat. Chi fighting is not really practical because you can't drum up or store enough chi energy to keep hitting somebody with chi. You'd have to hit him and knock him out or kill him with the first strike. Now, whether this could be done or not, again, is another area for discussion. But giving Bruce Lee his due, he does look great. He's a consummate actor, a consummate performer. He looks fantastic on screen, as does Van Damme, who I believe is a skilled martial artist, but probably against a Chuck Norris, a Joe Louis, or Steven Seagal probably is not as tough. Again, he has smaller size, etc. But to think that he is some boob either is another fallacy based mostly in jealousy. So let's remember some of those real masters out there, Joe Louis, and people who were real fighters who took one title after another and proved themselves to the entire world, like Chuck Norris. Now, I'm not a big fan of Chuck Norris. He turned into some sort of nutjob, religious, right-wing, Texas-living freak, and seems to have learned nothing from his Asian teachings. But the point is, nothing can be taken away from a guy who gets 5 titles for contact karate. Bruce Lee refused to compete. I think that says a lot in the long run.